The divorce I never saw coming. I always thought heartbreak would come with warning signs. A change in tone, a colder kiss, a missed anniversary. But mine came in a manila envelope, left on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee I made for him every morning for the last 6 years. I stared at it, heart pounding. It was addressed to me, in his handwriting. And inside, divorce papers. There was no fight the night before. No slammed doors, no drunken confession. We had dinner, we watched a movie. He kissed my forehead and said, "Sleep tight, babe." And the next morning, he handed me silence wrapped in legal language. I remember standing there, still in my pajamas, the smell of eggs and toast in the air. And suddenly the kitchen, the home we built, felt like a stranger's house. I picked up the phone, not to call him, but her, Camille, my best friend since freshman year of college. She had been there when he and I met. She had been there through every fight, every milestone, every holiday. She was my second voice, my safe place. She picked up on the second ring. "Hello, sunshine, what's up?" I couldn't speak at first. Then, through a cracked voice, "He left me." There was silence. Then, "Wait, what?" I told her. The envelope, the papers, the complete lack of warning. No way, he wouldn't just— "Cam, it's real." I could hear her shuffle. "Pace. I'm coming over, don't do anything, just wait for me." An hour later, she burst through the door. Pajamas, messy hair, no makeup. Exactly how a best friend should arrive during an apocalypse. She pulled me into her arms. "Let me cry," cursed him, held my shaking hands. "He's a coward," she said. "You deserve better." "I don't understand," I whispered. "We were fine. We were us. And that's the thing, we were us, until suddenly we weren't." The next few days were a blur. Meetings with lawyers, cold texts from him, Camille staying over, making tea, holding me up when I collapsed from sobbing. She even said, "If you need me at court, I'll be there, no matter what." And I believed her, because that's what best friends do. But then, 1 week later, I walked into the law office that was handling our case. I wanted to meet the attorney he had hired, to see the face of the person who would try to take apart the life I had built. I stepped into the conference room. The door opened, and in walked Camille, wearing heels, a tailored black suit, and a silver pin I had given her on her birthday last year. Our eyes met. Her face dropped. Mine shattered. "Camille?" I whispered. She didn't move, didn't blink. Then finally she said, "I didn't know you'd be here so soon." "What are you doing?" I asked, voice shaking. She cleared her throat, avoided my eyes. I'm representing Jason. I thought he told you." My heart stopped. "You're his lawyer?" She nodded. "It's just business, I swear. You said you'd stand by me. I didn't know it would be like this. He came to my firm. I didn't choose—" "Yes, you did." I walked out. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because I knew if I stayed, I would never stop screaming. That night, I sat in the dark. The same kitchen, the same coffee maker. Only now I was alone. Twice betrayed. Once by the man I loved, and once by the woman I trusted most. And the worst part? I didn't even know who I hated more. When she walked into court wearing his pin, I didn't sleep the night before. I sat in the living room where the wedding photo used to hang. Now it was just an empty hook on the wall. I stared at it for hours, as if staring long enough would rewind time. Morning came like a punishment. The court summons was for 9 a.m. sharp. Division of assets, no fault declaration, clean, sterile legal language to describe the mess inside my chest. I wore black, not to match grief, but to armor myself. I thought I was ready, until she walked in. Camille, hair perfectly pinned, papers in hand, lips neutral. No trace of the girl who once cried with me over breakups and bad grades. But worse than all of that was the pin. Silver, shaped like a tiny branch with 2 birds on it. I gave it to her on her 30th birthday, for always choosing to fly with me. I had written in the card. And now, she wore it for him. My stomach turned. I wanted to stand, to scream, to rip it off her chest and remind her what it meant. But I didn't. I sat, fingers clenched beneath the table, heart screaming in silence. Jason walked in a few minutes later, suit sharp, expression unreadable. He didn't look at me, just took his seat beside her. And then my Camille, opened her mouth. "Your Honor, my client has made every attempt to proceed with grace. He's requested minimal claims. He's seeking a peaceful transition." Peaceful. As if what he did was gentle. As if leaving without warning, without conversation, was grace. I stared at her, but she never met my eyes. My lawyer leaned toward me. "We expected her to be aggressive, but not this," I swallowed. She wasn't always like this. The rest of the session was a blur. Numbers, properties, my name next to terms like claimant and alimony. Their side arguing for fair division. but every word chipped away at the life I thought I had. When we broke for lunch, I stepped outside. Fresh air, fake calm. Then I felt her presence behind me. "Camille?" "I wanted to talk," she said. I turned slowly. "Now you want to talk?" She shifted her weight, avoided my stare. "This isn't personal. I didn't ask for this. But you didn't say no either. It's my job, Lena." I flinched at the sound of my name in her voice. "You were more than a job." Her face broke, just a little. "I know, and I hate that it had to be me. But Jason came to my firm and You could have recused yourself. I thought I could separate it, be professional. But you're not being professional, Camille," I snapped. "You're being cruel, and calculated, and cowardly." She looked down, silent. "Take the pin off," I said. Her eyes widened. "What?" "You don't get to wear it. Not here, not like this." "Lena, I didn't mean..." "Take it off." She reached for it slowly. Unquint. Stared at it in her palm, then handed it to me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But I didn't say anything. I just walked away. That night, I placed the pin on my nightstand. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed to remember, even the people who swore to fly with you can learn how to land elsewhere without you. The voice that used to defend me now cross-examines me. There are moments in life you never forget. The first time someone says, "I love you," the last time someone hugs you like they mean it, and the first time your best friend, the one who once swore she'd never let anyone hurt you, stands in court and tears your life apart, word by calculated word. Camille stood, notes in hand, tailored blazer buttoned to perfection, and a face I barely recognized anymore. "Miss Lane," she began, "let's talk about your financial contributions during the marriage." Miss Lane. Not Lena, not Babe, not my girl. Just another woman on the opposite side of her client. "Do you recall how many months you were unemployed during the first 3 years of your marriage?" My mouth went dry. I swallowed. I was between careers. I was taking care of the house, but not bringing in income. I was supporting Jason emotionally, managing our home. "Just to clarify," she interrupted, "that's a yes to not having employment for a stretch of 32 months. Correct?" I froze. She knew that time. She was there for every job rejection, every tear I shed when I felt useless, every pep talk she gave me to not give up. Now she was using it against me. "Yes," I said quietly. She nodded, took notes. "And during that time, your husband paid for all household expenses?" "He did, because we were a team." She looked up, expression flat. "Do you still consider yourself a team now, Miss Lane?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure who she was aiming that question at. Me? Or herself? She pressed on. "Is it true that during the final year of your marriage, your communication with your husband decreased significantly? We were going through things. Would you describe your relationship at that time as distant?" "Yes, but..." "So you admit the marriage was deteriorating long before he filed for divorce?" My lawyer objected. The judge allowed the question. "Yes," I admitted, "but that doesn't mean I saw this coming." Camille paused, then asked softly, "And do you believe your husband should have continued in a marriage where he no longer felt emotionally supported?" That was the moment. The moment I realized she wasn't just being his lawyer. She was defending him like she once defended me. I wanted to cry, scream, say, "You held my hand through those nights. You told me I was doing my best." But instead I kept breathing, steady, strong. "No," I said finally. "He shouldn't have stayed, but he should have told me he was leaving before he disappeared." The court fell silent. Camille said nothing, but I saw her blink too quickly. Her mask cracked, just for a second. And in that tiny space between question and silence, I saw the girl I once knew, and then she was gone. Later in the hallway, she tried to speak to me. "Lena, I held up a hand. Don't explain why you're doing your job, I get it. But this isn't just about law, it's about history. It's about the nights you sat on my couch crying about your ex, and I stayed up feeding you ice cream and hope. It's about the vow we made long before wedding vows. We never leave each other in the middle of the storm." Her eyes filled, but she said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The night I remembered their secret glances, I couldn't sleep. Again, it had become routine. Tossing and turning until 3 a.m., blinking into the ceiling, replaying the court scene again and again. But that night, something different happened. A memory came back, one I hadn't thought of in years. It was Jason's birthday, his 34th. We threw a party at our place, just close friends, drinks, music. Camille showed up late, as always. Wearing that green silk dress she knew turned heads. Jason smiled when he saw her. I noticed, but I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? She was my best friend. He was my husband. What threat could exist between two people I loved the most? Later that night, I was in the kitchen, refilling drinks, cutting the cake. Camille and Jason were in the living room talking. Alone. I glanced at them. They didn't touch. They didn't whisper. But they looked at each other. And I remembered that look. It wasn't attraction, it was familiarity. Like they knew something I didn't. Something they weren't saying out loud. I brushed it off then. Laughed it away. Told myself, they've just known each other through me. It's nothing. But that moment, the angle of her head. The way his lips curved slightly when he spoke to her. The way her eyes lingered just half a second too long. It wasn't nothing. Now, months later, that moment felt like a siren I ignored. A whisper I refused to hear. I sat up in bed, pulled out my old phone, scrolled through photos from that night. There it was, a picture someone had taken of the three of us. Jason in the middle, Camille on his right, me on his left. We were all smiling, but I zoomed in and saw it. Jason's hand wasn't on my back like I remembered. It was on Camille's shoulder, resting, casual, too casual. And her hand, lightly, so lightly, was touching his wrist, just for a moment. Just enough to make someone question, but not enough to accuse. I dropped the phone, suddenly breathless. What else had I missed? The weekends she stayed over. The times she insisted I go to sleep early while they cleaned up. The extra meetings Jason had at her office when I thought it was just work talk. Had it started before the divorce? Or was it always there? A quiet betrayal growing roots beneath my feet? The next day, I went to Camille's office. No appointment, just rage. She looked startled when she saw me. "Lena, how long?" I asked. She blinked. "What? How long have you been looking at him like that?" Her face drained of color. "You're being unfair." "No," I said, voice steady. "Unfair was letting me cry in your arms while you wore the perfume he liked. Unfair was calling me sister while wondering if he'd ever choose you instead." She stood, defensive. "We never did anything, Lena, I swear. You didn't have to." "It was in the way you looked at him." She didn't respond, because she didn't need to. The silence was loud enough. I turned to leave, stopped at the door. "He left me once, Camille." "But you? You left me every time you smiled at him when I wasn't looking." She called it just business, but it felt like war. The courtroom felt colder that day, not because of the temperature, but because I had stopped believing this was about the divorce. It had become a battle, and Camille, the one who once toasted my engagement with tears in her eyes, now sat across from me with files full of my past, ready to twist them into his defense. "Let's proceed," the judge said, and Camille stood, again, commanding, poised, sharp as glass. "We'd like to submit new documentation regarding financial instability and emotional inconsistency on the part of Miss Lane." My lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. I looked up at Camille. "What are you doing?" I whispered. She didn't flinch, didn't look at me. "Just doing my job. Just doing my job." Is that what she told herself when she helped Jason draft the asset division proposal that gave me nothing from the apartment I decorated? When she submitted screenshots of text arguments Jason and I once had? The ones I cried to her about, and she told me, "You were right to be mad." Now, she framed them as evidence of my emotional volatility. I felt like I was watching my own life weaponized against me by the one person who used to help me survive it. Break for lunch. Again, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to breathe. Camille followed me out into the hallway. She had no right, but she did. "Lena, wait." I stopped, didn't turn. "I hate that this is happening," she said, "but I have a responsibility, you know that." "A responsibility to who? Jason? Or your career?" She hesitated. "It's not personal." I turned around. "You're standing in a courtroom tearing me apart piece by piece. You're using my breakdowns, my trauma. You don't think that's personal?" She looked tired. Or maybe that's what guilt looks like on her. "I'm trying to stay professional, Lena." "Then why does it feel like you're trying to destroy me?" Silence. Long, loud. "Because you always had what I wanted," she finally said. There it was. Not shouted, not confessed in rage. Just whispered. Truth uncloaked. You had the marriage, the stability, the attention. Even when it was falling apart, he still looked at you like you were the sun. And I was just the friend, the backup, the shadow. I couldn't speak. Because a part of me, the part that always wondered why Camille's smiles felt so heavy, already knew. She stepped closer. Jason came to me for legal help, but he stayed because for the first time, I wasn't behind anyone. I stepped back. "So you used the law to rewrite the story in your favor." "I didn't mean for it to happen like this, but it did." She looked away. "I'm sorry, Lena." "No, you're not. You're relieved." And I walked away, this time with no tears, because something in me had finally cracked open, and it wasn't pain anymore. It was purpose. The evidence that broke me court resumed. The room felt colder than ever. Not because of air conditioning, but because I already knew today was different. Something had shifted in Camille. She didn't look like someone trying to win a case. She looked like someone about to end something. "Your Honor," she began, "we have supplemental evidence to submit regarding the emotional atmosphere of the marriage." I flinched. My lawyer turned to me. "Did you know they had new evidence?" "No," I whispered. "Not unless—" Camille hit play. A recording. My voice. "I can't do this anymore, Jason. I feel like I'm drowning with you. I wish I never married you." Silence. Then Jason's voice. "Maybe you should leave then." My voice again. "Maybe I will." The audio cut. The courtroom stayed still. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Was this recorded with consent?" "Yes, Your Honor." From a session the couple recorded during voluntary mediation with both parties' agreement. I stared at Camille. She didn't look back. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink. That recording? It was real, but out of context. It was from the worst night of our marriage. The night Jason admitted he'd had an emotional affair with someone at work. I said those words in hurt, not hate. I stayed after that session. We tried again. For months, but that wasn't on the tape. Only the part where I sounded like the one giving up. Only the part that made me look like the villain. My lawyer objected, requested full context. Judge allowed it. But the damage? Already done. The looks, the murmurs. Even Jason's glance across the table. As if he too had forgotten why I said those words. As if he believed I meant them from the start. Recess. I went to the hallway, hands trembling. Camille followed again. "Why would you use that?" I asked, broken. "It's part of the file, Lena, legally admissible." "You knew what that would do to me." She looked away. "Jason asked me to use it, and you obeyed." Silence. Then I saw it. The faintest guilt in her eyes. But guilt doesn't stitch wounds. It doesn't rewind tapes. It doesn't undo betrayal. You didn't break me because of what was on that tape, Camille. You broke me. Because you knew exactly what it meant, and you still pressed play. That night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I packed. Not because I was running, but because I was done standing still. I left the apartment we once shared. Took nothing but my journals, a few clothes, and my truth. Because if everything else was being rewritten, at least I'd keep my voice. The day I stopped crying and started fighting, I woke up on a stranger's couch. It was Malia's, a college friend I hadn't spoken to in over a year. But when I called her the night before, voice shaking and heart hollow, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come," and that's where I lay. Wrapped in an old blanket, watching sunlight crawl across the ceiling. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't cry. Because something inside me had shifted. Not healed, but hardened. And for once, that didn't scare me. That morning, I walked to the kitchen. Malia was pouring coffee. She looked up and smiled. "You look different," she said. "I feel different. What are you gonna do now?" I didn't answer right away. Then finally, "I'm going to fight. Not for him. Not against her, but for me." I went back to the courthouse that afternoon, sat beside my lawyer, looked Camille in the eye. She flinched. For the first time, she flinched. "We'd like to submit supplemental context," my lawyer said. "The full audio of the mediation session." Camille tried to object. The judge allowed it. The tape played. The missing parts. My voice. "I don't want to give up on us, but I can't be the only one trying." Jason's voice. "I messed up. I know. I don't know how to fix it." My voice again. "Then say that. Be honest with me. Don't make me feel like I'm crazy for needing you to show up." The court was silent. You could feel the tension shift. Not in my favor, not in his, but toward the truth. After the session, Camille approached me. "Lena, stop." She froze. "I'm not here to ask for your guilt. I'm not here to shame you. I'm just done being quiet while other people tell my story." She nodded slowly. "I underestimated you." I smiled. So did I. In the following weeks, I worked with my lawyer. Reviewed every document, checked every number, prepared my own statement, because I was no longer just a participant in my downfall. I was the architect of my comeback. The final hearing arrived. This time I wore white, not to represent innocence, but a new beginning. I stood up to speak. "Your Honor," I began, "I'm not here to paint myself as a victim. Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I was blindsided. But I also made mistakes. I shut down. I withdrew. But I never stopped trying. I didn't come here today to beg for sympathy or to punish anyone. I came to remind myself, and maybe others, that silence does not equal surrender. And heartbreak does not mean the end of identity." When I finished, the courtroom was still. Even Jason didn't look smug anymore. Even Camille looked human again. After the session, I walked out alone. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt powerful, because I had finally remembered who I was before all of this. And more importantly, who who I was becoming, her words, his lies, and my truth. The courtroom was packed that day, not with strangers, but with tension, so thick you could slice it. Even the judge looked tired of the documents, the statements, the contradictions, because everyone knew today was the turning point. Jason sat still. I saw Camille beside him, her eyes focused, her lips tight, but her hands trembled. My lawyer stood. We request the court to review Exhibit D, the string of emails between Mr. Jason Carter and Ms. Camille Brooks. A ripple moved across the courtroom. Camille turned pale. Jason leaned forward. Emails? He whispered. You told me you deleted them. She didn't respond, because it was too late. On the screen, a sequence of messages from 6 months before the divorce filing. Conversations between Camille and Jason. Late-night exchanges. Not romantic, but intimate. About me, about frustrations, about plans. Jason. She's emotionally exhausting. You get me in ways she never did. Camille. You don't have to justify anything. I've always seen you. Jason. Maybe I married the wrong one. Camille. Maybe it's not too late to fix that. The courtroom gasped. I didn't. Because somehow, I always knew. Jason tried to speak. Those weren't what they... The judge held up a hand. Mr. Carter, you'll have your turn. Camille stared ahead, frozen. And that's when I stood. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge nodded. Proceed. I turned to face them. Not with rage, not with tears, but with clarity. For months, I've been told this is just a divorce, that emotions don't matter, that loyalty is negotiable and the law is neutral. But what's on those screens? That's not neutral. That's betrayal. Slow, deliberate, and layered in polite conversation. I looked at Camille. She blinked fast. Her throat moved like she was swallowing something sharp. You said you were just doing your job, I said to her. But now I see you were doing something else. You were building your version of justice. A justice where I lose quietly, and you win without admitting you ever played the game. I turned to Jason. You didn't leave me because I was too much. You left because I was no longer convenient. And she made it easier to walk away. No one interrupted. Because they knew this was no longer legal. It was personal. And it was finally honest. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm not even asking for fairness. I'm here to say, you don't get to write me out of my own story. Silence. Then the judge spoke. We'll reconvene tomorrow to finalize all financial decisions. Court is adjourned. As everyone stood, Camille reached for her bag, but not before whispering, I never meant for this to happen. I looked at her, finally calm. That's the thing about betrayal, Camille. It doesn't need intention to leave scars. Outside the court, Jason approached me. Lena, I turned, met his eyes. Don't. I just wanted to say, save it, I said. You had every chance to love me better. And instead, you chose convenience over commitment. Then I walked away, not triumphant, but unburdened, because the worst had been said. And the truth finally had a voice, the verdict and the goodbye that wasn't mine. The courtroom was quieter that morning. No whispered gossip, no hard glares, just exhaustion. The kind that settles in after too many truths have been spilled and too many masks have fallen. The judge read the ruling. Assets will be divided equally, no spousal support to be requested by either party. The property shall be sold and profits split. My lawyer touched my arm. A silent, you did it. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a page turning. Nothing more, nothing less. Jason kept his head low. Didn't speak, didn't look at me. Not until we stood to leave. That's when he whispered, I'm sorry. I turned. For what? Everything. For not being who you needed. For letting her get between us. I laughed softly. Not out of joy, but out of the strange peace that comes when you finally stop needing apologies. You didn't lose me because of her, Jason. You lost me because you stopped choosing me. He looked stunned, as if he hadn't expected me to sound so calm, so free. He reached out gently. Do you think maybe someday? I stepped back. No, some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some just need to burn, so we stopped trying to cross them. He nodded. Didn't fight. Didn't beg. And for once I respected that. Outside, Camille waited near the courthouse steps. Alone. Clutching her purse like it held all her regrets. When she saw me, her face crumbled. Lena, please. I stopped in front of her. What do you want, Camille? She hesitated. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I wanted to say goodbye. I paused. Not because I didn't have words, but because some griefs don't need screaming. They just need silence. You already said goodbye, Camille. The moment you sat beside him in court. The moment you pressed play on that tape. The moment you decided your ambition mattered more than our history. Her eyes filled with tears. but I didn't reach out. Not this time. "I hope you find what you were chasing," I said, "because I've stopped running." Then I turned, walked away. No drama, no closure wrapped in a hug, just a quiet ending. One that wasn't mine to choose, but one I owned because I chose myself. The woman I became without either of them 6 months later, I moved into a little apartment above a bookstore. It wasn't glamorous. The walls creaked, the windows let in too much light in the morning, and the heating was temperamental. But it was mine, all mine. There were no wedding photos on the wall, no gifts from people who betrayed me. Just plants I kept alive, candles that smelled like new beginnings, and a mirror I could finally look into. Without shame, I started writing again. Not journal entries laced with sorrow, but stories, fiction, poetry. Tiny pieces of myself stitched into words, because something inside me still ached. But now it ached with purpose. I didn't hear from Jason again, not after that last goodbye. I sometimes wondered if he ever replayed our memories, if he saw my face in a dream and woke up missing a future he threw away. But I didn't dwell on it, because some ghosts aren't worth haunting yourself for. Camille tried once more. A letter, folded into 4 perfect squares. She wrote, "I wish I had known how to be your friend and still chase what I wanted. But I failed at both. And I lost the only woman who ever saw all of me and stayed." I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because I forgave her in silence. For me, not for her. One rainy afternoon, I walked past a park bench where Jason once told me he'd love me forever. I paused, breathed, smiled. "Forever," I whispered, was shorter than I thought. But what came after? That was the forever I never expected. Because I laughed louder now. I said no without guilt. I made tea at midnight without explaining why. I no longer needed someone beside me to feel whole. I met someone new, not a lover, just me. The version of myself I'd buried under compromises and what-ifs. She was braver, quieter, more curious. She liked long walks alone, rode in cafes with mismatched chairs, didn't apologize for crying when a song reminded her of something broken. I loved her. I became her. And if you ask me now, would you go back? Would you do it all over again? I'd say no, but I wouldn't erase it either. Because from that betrayal, that silence, that goodbye, I rose, I burned, I healed, I became. I am the woman I am today, not despite what happened, but because of it. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.